Thank you, iCenter. Thank you, GW. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I don't know if what I will share with you today belongs in the pro seminar, which in some ways is, from my understanding, an attempt to be very academic and pedagogical thinking. And I don't know if I have much of that to share at this moment. What I would like to share is, from my perspective, the need, and I know all of you are in different professional capacities, but the need for you both in your professional and personal capacities to demonstrate moral clarity and moral courage at this time. And I cannot emphasize enough how important that is and the need to model it for your community members, for your staff, for students, for your learners of any age, because there is a very strong sense of paralysis by many, of not knowing what to say, not knowing how to say it. They need models that they can emulate and learn from. And as this conflict and this war proceeds, and it will for quite a while, there will be fatigue. That fatigue and the whataboutisms will emerge. It already has. The media coverage will grow increasingly more distant from supporting Israel. And we need to be prepared as those who are on the front lines of our communities in various capacities to think about how we continue to center the conversation and to do so both with humility, but with strength. I met with students who were at a Chabad Pagisha over Shabbat, about 1,200 students who came to New York. I believe 100 of them left or decided not to attend once they heard about the pro-murder, pro-rape Hamas rally down the street. I'm very clear with my language, and I'm intentionally clear with my language, and I hope you understand that. I go to many of these rallies. I've been going for 20 years. The first ones at Duke and Georgetown, I've been sitting in these rallies even before we had cell phones to record these individuals and what they would say. These conversations are not about coexistence. These presentations are not about creating a shared society between Jews and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs. These conversations are not about a two-state paradigm. These conversations are explicit and intentional and talking about the annihilation of the largest Jewish population in Israel and Jews writ large. You should not be mistaken. If you are mistaken, then you need to wake up right now because you are delusional. And I'm not saying that to point fingers. I am not saying that to be a jerk, but I am saying that because I truly believe we are in a moment of crisis. And I need you all to recognize this moment and to be sounding the alarm bell. When I met with these students who were in attendance at the Pagisha, there were some who truly said, do we need to be in a bomb shelter right now because of what's happening down the street? It's absurd. It's laughable. We are in the middle of Brooklyn. And yet, this is where some of their minds went. There were others who said, I post regularly on social media how I feel, what's happening in Israel, my solidarity with the Jewish and Israeli communities. And I know that I am now a target on campus. I'm accosted, I'm verbally assaulted when I walk across the campus quad. When do I start hiding my Jewish identity? That is where we are. It is not just on campus. I hear it from middle school students. I hear it from high school students. I had a parent who called me the other day because the DEI officer at one of the leading independent schools in New England, here in the Boston area, a very well-known school, was met by the DEI officer and said the following to her. And this is to a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School who sends her child to BBNN, who is Jewish, and said the following. I am very sorry to see how your community is being targeted at this moment. And I have to imagine what's harder for you is that you have to come to terms with the way in which your own community has been abusing darker-skinned indigenous peoples for generations. And I know that that's hard to do, but I hope that you have the ability to be able to look at your history and recognize all of the horror that your people have committed. This is a DEI officer. This professor was so taken aback, and this is a very senior person, because did not expect this to come from this DEI officer, that she legitimately did not know what to say and didn't realize how this was being presented to her until she left the conversation. That's the paralysis I'm talking about. That cannot go without being addressed. I am meeting with Jewish educators. Many of them are incredible. Many of them are Israeli. And the Israeli educators are saying to me, we know how important it is to do this work, and we do not have the emotional koach, the strength to do it right now. They need us to be able to help support them in this particular moment. I regularly hear from the Jewish educators, and again, good, well-intentioned individuals who really feel that they do not have what you all have, the knowledge, the pedagogy, the resources to be able to engage in this conversation and do so with confidence. You need to reach out to those Jewish educators and provide whatever they need, whether it's you coming to be a presenter and a speaker, or whether it is you pointing them in the direction of how they can do their work best, but they cannot be left unattended at this moment. There are a few individuals who said to me, you're an academic, Rachel, you're a scholar, you have expertise to be able to teach at the highest possible level. Can you still hold multiple perspectives? Can you still hold conflicting views? And my answer to that is, of course, I can hold multiple perspectives. I know how to do this work. I've been trained to do this for a very long time. But it is important to understand that there is nothing that can be said at all in terms of holding multiple perspectives that justifies or rationalizes the nightmare that unfolded and that was perpetrated against Israelis on October 7th in Israel. Full stop. So when you start to hear the justifications and the mental hoops that individuals jump through in order to say, well, look, this is about liberation. This is about resistance. This is about 75 years of occupation. You need to stop them. You need to correct the fallacies that they are putting out there, because people do not know and will listen. And part of the reason people do not know and will listen is because of the following three elements that I think are really important for you all to understand, which I don't really talk about when I teach my Israeli history course, but you all need to know because it is the world in which we live. And not everyone will agree. So Ben, Barry, Michael Foyer, feel free to disagree. I'm very comfortable with that. But I feel strongly that we right now are living in a world in which generations of young individuals, probably many of you as well, because you're much younger than I am, are being fed a steady diet of postmodernism, postcolonialism, and postnationalism. Those theoretical frameworks, which could have value and do have value when they are tools to learn how to examine a variety of ideas, they do not have value when they are utilized as the primary lens through which to refract all ideas and all issues. What do I mean by that? First of all, if you don't know what these terms are, you need to learn them. They all come about after the period of World War II. Post-nationalism is the idea that you don't need to organize the world based upon nation states. It's the idea that nation states in some ways are problematic because it creates a sense of quote unquote tribalism. And if you just create other ways of organizing global communities, you will end to some degree the conflicts that we see playing out. It is a misperception in my mind, because the reality is that A, this is how the world is organized, and B, you can see, even if you look at, for example, Brexit as the example, take it away from the Middle East, that people deeply care about their connection to their nation state. Nationalism is alive and well. You cannot diminish it. It is a reality. It is a phenomena to which people hold on to. So a post-nationalist idea isn't at all realistic. And secondly, the test case that everyone wants to use to create a post-nationalist world is Israel. Israel should be the first nation state that is dissolved. It is anachronistic according to them. And you need to challenge that premise. That's point one. Post-colonialism, in many ways, we know, of course, the challenges, the real societal issues colonialism presented. We know the harm that it caused for many populations. And yet, not everything that colonialism did can be understood as, or should be understood as, an ultimate sin. There are elements of colonialism that are worthwhile to investigate and understand. And in terms of the Israel conversation, Israel has been presented as being a white imperialist outpost, a colonialist entity in the midst of a region in which it has displaced a darker-skinned indigenous native population. That is the framework. That is a very problematic framework. Now, if we're sitting in my class, we will have an academic discussion about what is colonialism versus colonization, what is colonialist settler, does Israel fit that paradigm? That's a very real academic discourse. That is not the discourse that is taking place at the pro-murder, pro-rape rallies. That is not what is being discussed. What is being discussed is ultimately that Israel was created in sin, and therefore Israel has no right to exist, and neither do the people who are in it. Why you need to understand that is because if anyone says, well, this is about settlers, the kibbutz Be'eri, kibbutz Cholit, kibbutz Nir Oz, none of these individuals are settlers. It is not a conversation about settlement. Settlement in these individuals' minds who are perpetrating these lies is about the existence of the state of Israel, and de facto it does exist. That's post-colonialism. Postmodernism, and this is one of the biggest challenges, and I need all of you to actually think about it. I need you to come up with ways to reclaim what we believe matters in terms of facts. A postmodernist world says facts are all debatable. No fact actually can go uncontested. And everyone's narrative is equal. And if everyone's narrative is equal, it means that it's okay for Hamas to justify the murder and the rape of children. Now, why does this pose a problem? First, as a historian, I deeply care about facts. I think they matter. You can have a lot of interpretation around facts. You can have a lot of different narratives that make sense and make meaning for individuals around facts. But facts still exist. So if we're living in a world in which people want to diminish facts, then how do you actually engage with them in a serious and meaningful way with good intention? When I hear from individuals who are very high on opinion and very low on knowledge, it poses a serious challenge. Because this is a population of don't knows who need knowledge, and yet they are not open to hearing the information because it doesn't purport or conform to the narrative they have been told or that they tell themselves. And if the conversation ultimately is about how it makes them feel rather than what they know, then it raises a serious issue about how we convey information, the way in which we present it, and how we ultimately impact how people think, how people feel, and then how they behave. You compound this with the reality that we have a younger generation, and I'm talking really here about 13 to 35-year-olds in America, who ultimately have a very poor sense of literacy globally, let alone about the Middle East, let alone about Israel, who have very strong perceptions and sentiments around Jews, Judaism, and Israel, and who are deeply influenced by the realm of social media, which we know does not allow for any meaningful exchange, that the algorithms are created so that what enrages is what engages, where AI is used for the creation and doctoring of content, where we know that dopamine and that drive of dopamine quickly gives us some kind of immediate feeling that people desire and respond to, in a world in which we have less than 2 seconds to grab someone's attention, and where we have put in place societally 3 things: a litmus test defining how progressive one is, which is usually how anti-Israel and how anti-Jewish they are, a herd mentality that doesn't want to go against the grain and be canceled, and thirdly, we have in place a situation in which minority communities, and especially the younger you go, have stronger feelings that are problematic and negative towards Jews, Judaism, and Israel. That is not popular to say, especially because so many of us care so deeply about building bridges with these other vulnerable minority communities. And yet, we do not have any connection in a substantive way to build bridges between these communities in order to help them move from being don't knows to positively predisposed and allies for the Jewish community. And we, the Jewish community, have failed also to meet them where they are. This does not bode well, everything I am describing, and thinking about then how we actually address the younger communities that we need to reach, knowing that these other larger intellectual factors influence and cultivate hostility toward the positions that some of us hold very dear, and I would hope that's all of you. Which is why I need your brains to help think about how best do you address these issues, and how do we then talk about them, knowing that people don't want to actually hear the information they need to hear. People are deeply focused and motivated on their own intellectual agenda, which is very challenging to the existence of the Jewish people. Notice I didn't say just Jewish state. And also living in a world in which it has been completely normalized to hate Jews. The moral guardrails have been so far lowered that it is absolutely acceptable, it is permissible, and it's almost as if in many circles, especially the ones around the academy, that it is the cause du jour, it is the ideal sort of focus, that if you are not at all putting forth an anti-Israel, let alone an anti-Jewish position, you are completely out of the discourse. So I need you all to understand this, which is why I'm speaking from my heart. I did not prepare anything today. To be honest, I don't have time. I need you all to understand, though, the way in which we are living. Erica said something actually very kind to suggest that I'd even come close to being in the Miluim. I am spending literally every waking minute doing this nonstop, whether it's with parents, whether it is with educators in Jewish settings and non-Jewish settings, whether it is with Jewish communal organizations who say what my professionals need, they don't have, and I need to figure out how to give it to them now. And you all know that you cannot do this work in a crisis. The whole reason the iCenter, I'm not going to say the whole reason, and excuse me, Barry and Ann and everyone else, but a main reason the iCenter exists is to prepare for this kind of moment where you all can then, use the military term, be deployed to be the soldiers on the ground, to be on the front line, to support all of these other communities who do not have the investment that you have made educationally in terms of your knowledge and in terms of your ability to articulate it. You need to be serving as translators to the larger worlds you are in about what is happening in Israel, how Israelis are feeling, in order to be able to express that in a very serious, human-centered way. The last thing I'll say, and then I'm happy to take some comments or questions, is that please do not think for a second that I also do not center the reality of Palestinian lives. Please do not think for a second that I do not think that Israel shouldn't be criticized. Know that Israel and the issue of Palestinians is something that my entire professional and personal life has been dedicated to. And at the same time, know that when we are talking about eradicating Hamas, we are talking about that in order to improve the lives of Palestinians as well. That is not lip service. That is not a talking point. It is 100% what needs to happen in order to even imagine the possibility of creating a sustainable future for the Palestinian people. That is part of the challenge I hear from educators and communal professionals in terms of where you actually fit in the criticism of Israel, where you actually fit in Palestinian identity and empathy. None of this is mutually exclusive. None of it. But to pretend for a moment that you do not have your solidarity and that you are not on the Jewish tribal team is actually a moment of weakness. And I'm going to use a strong word if you cannot articulate that. You have to be able to articulate without shaking, while standing quite firm, that you understand that human life should never be diminished. And at the same time, Jewish life cannot be targeted right now. This is about the future of the Jewish people. This is about the future of the Jewish state. And to be honest, I think this is about the future of Western civilization. And I know that may make me sound a little nuts, but I've accepted that I'm a little nuts. So that is my charge to all of you. And I truly believe every one of you has the opportunity, the koach, and the ability to do it. This is what you were trained for. And you shouldn't doubt it for a second. And if you need support, then you need to turn to folks, Erica, Ben, others. You can turn to me, but you need to be able to do the work now. Now is not the time to shy away from it. Now is not the time to be averse to conflict. Put on your big boy, big girl pants, whatever you need to put on, and go, because it is the moment and it can no longer be someone else's responsibility. That's all I've got.